Hey, grandparents, as we continue our discussion of grandparents raising grandchildren, I want to talk today a little bit about behavioral issues. You know they will arise. They arise with all children. They have to test us. You know that from experience. And if you couple that natural tendency with the perhaps disruption and some turmoil that's been in their life as a result of whatever change brought it to be that you are raising your grandchildren, there's just bound to be some troubled times. And so today I want to share an article particularly about making rules and then keeping them with your grandchildren, because you will need to be the disciplinarian now. I think one of the luxuries of grandparenting is that you don't have to be the 24/7 disciplinarian. But now, if you're raising grandchildren in your home, you will have that role again. And it may be somewhat modified because you're the grandparent. But the reality is, when we are parenting children, a part of our responsibility is to teach them how to behave, how to interact with other people, and to set rules and follow them. So I want to share this article. We'll put the link in the notes to the video, but it's called Grandparents Raising Grandchildren, Disciplining Your Grandchildren, and then it really goes into the rules for making rules. And as you read through this is 7 pages long. Lots of great tips in there, and I'll just glance through a few of them, talk to you about them, but I would highly recommend that if you are raising grandchildren, go take a look at this. It was from the University of Georgia Cooperative Extension, and it's a great resource. I just was so impressed. But it talked about things like rules should be necessary, rules should be realistic. Maybe have your grandchildren help you set the rules and age adjust them by having them help you reevaluate, set some of the consequences for breaking rules, things like that. And I think that's just great advice. I found anytime I did ask my children something like that, they tended to have harsher punishments in mind than I did, which in a way made me feel good. But if they're engaged in that process, it helps. It helps them to follow the rules when they've been a part of setting them. So here are some of the other topics that they cover. Rules should have reasons. I really like that they also said just because is not a good answer. Kids don't receive that. We don't receive it as adults. We need to know the why of things, and it's not being disrespectful to ask why if you do it in a polite way. It's just needing to understand, and understanding makes things a lot easier, especially rules. If you understand why the rules are there, makes a lot more sense. Don't stick your finger on the oven or the stovetop. Why? I want to put my hand there. Well, it will get burned badly and you will be in pain. Oh, that makes sense. It's as simple as that sometimes. We need to explain why rules are in place, help them understand, and that helps make it a little easier maybe not to break rules. Here's another one that's hard, and it may be harder as grandparents, but rules, once they're made, should be enforced consistently. And it's so easy sometimes, even with our own kids, it was easy to be tired and let things slide one time and then it slide 2 times. But the reality is the more there's consistency, ultimately the less rule breaking goes on. So that's a good thought. Let me find something else here. Don't give in to embarrassment. Sometimes children misbehave in public. We've all seen it. We've all experienced it. And sometimes it's embarrassing and you just try to do whatever to cover it up. But occasionally we need to just stop and have a consequence. And probably one of the best examples is in a grocery store. Kids seem to go crazy in grocery stores, and shopping becomes so difficult. Well, one of the best responses, but a hard one to do, is to simply stop and leave the grocery store. Say, we're not finishing this because your behavior is not acceptable. And you leave the work you've done already and you walk out of the store and the child knows why. It's not a big blame game. It's just, this was unacceptable, so we're leaving. And that gets their attention. They're embarrassed too at that point. And so I've used that one. It worked very effectively and it helped. Ultimately, I enjoyed going to the grocery store with my kids, but I did discover as they got older, things would appear on the conveyor belt that I hadn't put in my cart, and my grocery bill was always higher when I took the one or more of the kids with me to the grocery store, especially as they were teenage boys and eating like horses. So keep that in mind too. Here's some other ideas. Let's see. Refuse to fight or give in. And again, this is the hardest thing, because usually when rules are being broken, especially if it's something that, you've said 1,000 times, don't do this, and it's still happening, it's really easy to get angry. But, the writer of this article says, refuse to fight or to give in. Just stand your ground. And really, one of the most effective little phrases is, this is not acceptable. I won't tolerate this. It's a no. It just is not acceptable. And then change and go right on. If there's a consequence in that moment, the consequence happens and off you go. And they learn very quickly what's acceptable behavior and what's not acceptable behavior. I wanted to highlight this statement. Toward the end of the article, it talks about teaching appropriate behavior. And really, that's what rules are about. We're teaching our children to be safe, to interact nicely with others, to care about what others are saying, doing, feeling, so that their behavior is appropriate. And it says that to be effective, discipline needs to teach children the right ways to behave. And I want to pause and just talk about that for a minute. Why is that so important? Children grow up to be young adults and adults. If they haven't learned how to behave as children, then they behave poorly as young adults and older adults. And we have all seen this. We've all experienced, the super rude person in line somewhere. We've seen, super selfish behavior, had people cut in line in front of us just blatantly, any number of things. Think about it for 2 seconds and you'll have an example in your mind. We don't want that to be our grandchild ever. Whether they're being raised by their parents or raised by us, our goal is always to train them up to be fine, outstanding adults who behave well in public, keep the laws, and treat other people with kindness and respect. So if you're struggling with the need to have rules and you don't think they're necessary, maybe put it in that mindset. It's a training ground. It's not punishment. It's a training tool to help young ones who come into this world with no understanding of how to behave. They start their life crying because they're hungry and crying because their diaper needs a change, or crying because something else is making them uncomfortable. They don't know anything about, the finer art of communicating their needs until we train them. And rule making and rule following is part of that process. So again, find the link in our notes. Check out this article, print it out. If you're raising grandchildren, I think it would be a great guide and a help to you if you're having troubles with behavior and how to set appropriate rules in your household. Be grand, my friends.